Welcome everybody to AOPA Live for, I believe, the 4th of October. Where's the year gone? All this time disappearing. I actually tried to get this broadcast out a little bit earlier today, and I do extend an apology to everybody. I started the broadcast on my laptop computer, and unfortunately, it decided it wasn't going to play ball, so I've come home to do this from my studio here this evening at home. But tonight's broadcast and today's live stream is about Canberra Airport. It's about what's going on down at the airport in our nation's capital, a location which we all need access to by road and by aircraft. And the news, unfortunately, is that the airport operator is moving to displace the threshold of runway 12, which will serve to shorten the length of the runway and make the airport less safe for aviation, and of course will erode, undermine aviation use and of course the capabilities of the airport. Now, for anybody that has been attuned to the issues facing general aviation over the last 20 years since privatisation has taken a hold, none of this is new. This is just another sad story of a privatised airport that's being run largely by property developers and people who are placing the interests of property development ahead of the interests of the aviation industry, ahead of the capabilities of the aviation industry, and sadly, ahead of safety at these airports. Now, as I kick into the conversation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up on screen a graphic here. I'm just going to try and get this set up. Okay, so what I've got here is just simply Google Earth. You can access this via Google Maps online, and I've typed in Canberra Airport, and you can see it's marked there in red. And if we just zoom in, this is the airport layout as of the last scan of Google Maps. And the airport comprises of the main north-south runway, but also has an east-west diagonal runway there, which is runway 3012. And this runway is predominantly used by small to medium-sized aircraft and operators, and is used because the winds are not always favouring that north-south runway. And of course, if you're arriving in a small, medium-sized aircraft, you don't have the crosswind capability of the larger aircraft. And what you have to do is you've got to use that cross runway. So for many, many years, this cross runway has been absolutely essential in supporting aviation at Canberra. And nobody needs reminding, Canberra Airport is the gateway to our nation's parliamentary capital. This is the gateway. If anybody across Australia would like to visit Canberra to speak to their elected officials or to represent their issues, you can get there via road, you can get there via the airport. And for many farmers and people across regional and remote Australia who own aircraft, and aircraft form a backbone out in those remote areas, they'll be flying into this airport location, and most likely they're going to end up using this east-west runway, again, depending on the wind. So it has come with some pretty sad news that the people at Canberra Airport have issued an invitation to the general aviation industry, or to what they actually state to be their general aviation access holders. So I'm not sure whether they intended to invite the broader aviation industry, or they simply intended to invite the general aviation users that have access passes at Canberra. But nonetheless, they're inviting general aviation users to attend a briefing which will occur on Wednesday, the 26th of October, from 6 p.m. through to 8 p.m. at the Alistair Swain Theatre, which is in the business park at the airport. And what they're going to be learning all about in that briefing is how the airport will be displacing runway 12 threshold, the 12 threshold which is seen here on this northern section. It's going to be brought further south, and they're going to be reducing the length of this runway. And that reduction, or that displacement of threshold, is not being done to improve aviation safety. And this is a really big point in this, is that for Canberra Airport to try and argue that they're displacing the runway threshold because they're improving safety at the airport would be it would be laughable. It would be a joke. It just simply is not the case. That runway is being displaced because of a more basic and more pressing issue for the airport, and that is property development. And if we go back to our graphic here and we zoom in, you can see off to the north of runway 12, the threshold at 12, you can see all of this development that's taking place. Now, Have a look at the airport site and have a look at what they're doing. They're squeezing in every last piece of non-aviation that they can into this business park, but they want more. They're not happy with what they've got. They want to make more millions. They want more money in the bank. And so now they're at a point where they're prepared to start saying, well, to hell with aviation. We're running a non-aviation business park here, and this aviation is proving to be a bit of a problem, so we want to remove it. And they're going to dig into this space here, out on that end, and we are likely now to lose the general aviation parking, and this entire precinct is likely to end up completely redeveloped into more of this. More car parks for shopping centres, commercial, industrial. You can see a huge IKEA was being installed here. I'm not sure if that's been completed as yet. We've got the hotel business park complex, which has been installed on the airport. We're going to see more of this. And the reason the airport wants to do more of that is there's millions involved in it. They're not interested in aviation. There's no money to be made in aviation. All of the money is to be made in property redevelopment. Now, I put together a graphic some time ago. I actually wrote about this issue. I'll bring it back up on screen. I wrote about this issue some time ago. Back in April of 2020, I published an article, which was an opinion piece I put out that spoke about Canberra Airport cross runway 1230 closure. And I wrote an article that outlined that it was my view and the view of AOPA at the time that the closure of the runway, which they cited was due to COVID, was bullshit. It was a bullshit story. It was then, and it's become completely obvious now that it was nothing other than that. They closed the runway down during COVID because no doubt what they wanted to see was what kind of reaction the aviation industry was going to give them. And now that they're out of COVID, they don't want the runway reopened, but they probably realise that closing the runway entirely, Department of Infrastructure and the government is likely to step in. So now what we're going for is they're potentially going to displace this runway threshold, shorten the runway down, commence their air park, it's not their air park, sorry, their non-aviation development in that northern section. And of course, it won't stop there. And I put together a graphic, which I included in that original article. And I'll just bring it up on screen, it's even larger. And this is what you need to be looking at. Now, I've been doing this for a while now with AOPA, and I've seen all kinds of games played by privatised airport operators. And I've seen all the sleights of hand and all of the nonsense games that they play. But here it is here. If you remove the cross runway at Canberra Airport, all of the areas that I've highlighted in pink suddenly become areas that they can develop for non-aviation use. And if you look at the size of those development spaces, you can see what's motivating the people at Canberra Airport. There's no motivation for aviation down there. They don't really care about what's happening to general aviation in any respect whatsoever. They care about shopping centres. They care about IKEAs. They care about hotels. They care about business parks. They do not care about ensuring that general aviation has a safe and equitable access at this airport site. What is motivating them is money. We have property developers that masquerade as airport people, and they are going to continue this march, and this is not going to stop until something is done to address this head on. And so the purpose of the live stream tonight is to talk about it and hopefully convey this in a very visual sense. We are about to lose a significant portion of the runway 1230 at Canberra Airport, and it is going to be turned into non-aviation property development. Now, when the airports were privatised, they were done so on the argument that the government needed private investment at these airports to improve aviation. How is this development, how is this shortening of this runway, the displacement of that threshold, how is that improving aviation? It's not improving aviation. Everybody can see through this. It's as transparent as a glass window. It's as obvious as the day is long what is going on here. And it's wrong. It shouldn't be going on. I took a quick look at the Department of Infrastructure's website here this evening, which I'll bring up on screen. and it talks about which airports are federally leased. And it says that the Department of Infrastructure at infrastructure.gov.au are responsible for oversight functions which include airport planning, development and land use, airport insurance compliance, airport environment and building control regulation, and payment of government rates and taxes. Now, it outlines that these federally leased airports, and keep this in perspective, these airports are not owned by these companies that are operating them. They're leased, they're rental tenants. These companies are supposedly being oversighted by the Department of Infrastructure. And yet it's not happening. How is it that this company who rents this airport is going to be allowed to reduce the available runway length permanently? They've got a lease with the Commonwealth that says they will maintain the airport. How is reducing aviation capability maintaining an airport? It's just not. Where is the Department of Infrastructure in this? Why has this gotten to a point where this airport operator has been allowed to progress to quote unquote final consultation? And why is it that very few people across the aviation industry have absolutely no awareness that this was going on? That this has snuck through under the radar during COVID, and we've come out the other side of COVID now learning that these greedy property developers are at it again, and that they're not going to be happy until they slice into this runway 1230, until it is useless to anything meaningful. And once again, aviation is reduced in its capability. Aviation safety is put at risk. But don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, more profits will be rolling in the front door of those involved in Canberra Airport and its parent company. It's really quite shameful that this is going on. And it's hard to believe that after all of the examples that have been laid before the government's feet, Moorabbin Airport, Jandakot Airport, Bankstown Airport, Canberra Airport, Archerfield Airport, everywhere privatisation has touched in aviation, it has resulted in the wholesale rape and pillage of aviation. And what for? It's done to make money. We have traded aviation capability so that we can have IKEAs at airports. We have traded aviation safety so that we can have DFOs at airports. Now, it's not that long ago that we saw a King Air spear into the roof of a DFO at Essendon, unable to climb out for whatever reason. It hit the building regardless. Do we really want more of these outcomes occurring in Australia? How safe is it that we allow structures to be built beyond the threshold of runway 1230? Right now, there are none. It's at the highest levels of safety that can be afforded right now. Why would we want to displace that runway threshold, resulting in shortening the runway available length, resulting in reducing aviation capability, and resulting in increasing the risk and reducing safety? None of this seems to tick even the slightest box. Does it pass the pub test? Hell no, it doesn't pass the pub test. Yet it's likely to happen. And it's going to happen directly, and it's going to happen clearly under the watch of this person. This is Catherine King. This is the minister responsible for aviation. This is the person within the Australian government who heads up at this point in time. Her government, the Labor Party, head up and are in control of the direction that the Department of Infrastructure are working. Has this minister signed off on this? I dare say that this project will avoid a ministerial decision. They'll claim that it is all being done under the MDP threshold. No doubt, I'm sure they can craft an outcome there to make it look like that. But then once that project is being completed to displace that runway threshold, and in the months to come we learn that there's a multi-million dollar development taking place that far exceeds the MDP, where do we sit then? See, ladies and gentlemen, this is all about playing games. These property developers are so much smarter than these ministers, and they're so much smarter than these bureaucrats in the Department of Infrastructure. These people are outpaced, outrun, outgamed, outthought, outsmoked. They are in another league to themselves. And until such time that the minister kicks her backside into gear, whether it be a Labor minister, a Liberal minister, or a Nationals minister, they need to kick their ass into gear, and they need to demand that these projects be stopped, that these projects be put through the full scrutiny that is required to ensure that we're maintaining aviation capability and aviation safety. And that's not an unrealistic thing to ask, nor is it an unrealistic thing to expect from the federal government, which to this day continues to own these sites on behalf of us, the taxpayer. These are our airport sites. They do not belong to the people who work at Canberra Airport. They belong to all of us. Why do we want our airports being bastardised and turned into shopping centres and reducing aviation capability and increasing the risks and reducing safety at these airport sites? We don't. But they're getting away with it because they're gaming the system, and the system is so lapsed, and the people at the Department of Infrastructure are so ignorant as to what's going on that they probably haven't got a clue what's happening around them. Now, there'll be some that'll say, Ben, that's a very unfair characterisation. Is it? Is it really an unfair characterisation when we're seeing so much of this go on around the countryside? It's either blatant incompetence or it's corruption. What is it? It's one of the two. You can't have both. And if you've got both, God help a lot of us, but they're either completely ignorant and have no clue what they're doing at the Department of Infrastructure, or they're corrupt. Because no normal person tasked with the responsibility of looking after these airports on behalf of the taxpayer would agree and approve these developments. They just wouldn't do it. And so I'll leave it up to everybody to decide exactly where you see it sitting. But from my perspective, this is just such an abuse. It is such an abuse of our aviation industry. It continues to be one of the greatest national embarrassments that could have existed. There's been zero oversight take place, and we in the aviation industry are the ones to suffer. It is our aviation infrastructure that's slowly being turned into car parks, shopping centres, DFOs, IKEAs. These ministers come and go. These ministers don't fly. They're not involved in aviation. They can sit back and make no decisions, and they don't care less about it, because when they get out of bed tomorrow, none of these issues are even influencing the world that they exist in. And so what a shame, what a great shame it is that we're in this situation where we have these property developers running circles around our elected officials and our government departments. They're just completely outclassing the guys down there at Parliament House, and something has to be done. Now, speaking about what you can do on this issue, I've got the minister's details up on screen right there. What I recommend everybody in the aviation industry does is you write a quick email to catherine.king.mp@aph.gov.au. Write a quick email and ask the minister, Dear Minister, can you please explain why Canberra Airport is being allowed to shorten runway 1230, reducing aviation capability, degrading aviation safety so that they can build more non-aviation property development? Why, as a participant of the aviation industry, is our government allowing the erosion of our aviation infrastructure simply to hand more money to property developers who've already made hundreds of millions of dollars each from privatisation? That's a great start. Ask that question and let's see what kind of answers we get. And if we can inundate the minister's office with enough inquiries, maybe the minister's going to take some interest in this issue, because someone ought to take some interest in it instead of it continuing on unabated. What a shame. What an entire shame that this is the situation with our privatised airports, and it's just out of control, out of control. Many will remember about a year and a half ago, I sought to contact, at the time it was Janet Quigley, who was in charge of airports. I'm not even sure if Janet Quigley's still in charge of airports at infrastructure. I've sent some inquiries through today after gearing up to do this live stream to try and get some more information. And what did I learn from my conversations with Janet Quigley? Janet Quigley admitted on the phone, the person who was in charge of airports, that she hadn't even been out to these airport sites. She hadn't even seen them firsthand. She had no comprehension or idea whatsoever as to what was happening at these airport sites, and simply was relying on the privatised airports to engage with her. Of course, they're going to give her a great story, aren't they? And where are all the other industry groups on this issue? Where are all the industry groups calling out these reprehensible developments that are undermining aviation safety? How come we have these industry groups and they're sitting silent on this issue, when in fact this is the biggest issue that's actually facing aviation in our country, is the erosion of access to aviation and the multiplication of the costs of accessing aviation in this country, largely driven by the monopolies that have been created by privatisation. Where are all the industry groups calling this out? Why is it that they're silent on these issues? They need to get off their asses too. If you want to protect your industry, guys, you need to get involved in protecting your industry. This issue is so real that just prior to COVID, the major airlines in this country were starting to call out privatised airport operators and were describing them as raping the airline industry. Now, it was profound that the airline industry had finally gotten to a point where they themselves were speaking up on this issue, saying we can't continue to absorb these outrageous increases in costs at these privatised airports. They're killing us. The airlines were speaking louder than the small end of general aviation, where we require access to this. Guys, this has got to change. We need to fight, and we need to fight publicly for these airports. Otherwise, we're going to lose these airports. There will be very few left that we will be able to access. So there you go. Canberra Airport. Jump online, create an email, tap it out today. catherine.king.mp@aph.gov.au. Send our minister an email and ask her, why is our government allowing the closure of the runway 1230, the displacement of the runway threshold of runway 12, shortening the length of runway 1230, resulting in reducing aviation capability and reducing aviation safety at Canberra Airport? It's a great question to ask. Thank you so much, guys. And of course, I'd be remiss if I never asked the question at the end of each of these videos. If in fact you like the work that AOPA Australia does in standing up for the aviation industry and calling out this kind of reprehensible behaviour by these airports, then I thoroughly invite you to jump online to aopa.com.au/membership. Become a member. It's $159 to become part of AOPA and to help us make a push in getting these types of issues sorted out. There's been a great deal of work that this association has tackled over the last 5 years that I've been involved. We've got some amazing results there that the industry will be is benefiting from already, and the stuff that's coming down the pipeline. Get involved. Get involved. Come and take part. Be a member. Stand with us. Let's keep pushing on for a better, more vibrant, more successful aviation industry. Thank you, guys.